All right, so yesterday we learned about the difference between a utopia and a dystopia. So can someone remind the class what a utopia is and what a dystopia is? Right, a utopia was like a heaven on earth, like a perfect society or form of government, and a dystopia was basically like the opposite of that. It was like a utopia that had failed somehow, and there was environmental damage, normally like ruled by the army. Okay. So yesterday you guys wrote a 5-paragraph essay about the differences between a utopia and a dystopia. So in your table groups, I want you to go ahead and swap essays, and you guys will have 10 minutes to read each other's essays and then to peer review them. And then I want you to turn it in, and then I'll do the final grading and reading and get those notes back to you. Okay, so today we are going to finally learn what a manifesto is. So our objectives for today is we're going to learn what a manifesto is. We're going to look at some examples of a manifesto, and then you're going to write your own manifesto. Okay, and so your manifesto will be your idea of a perfect utopia, basically. All right, so has anyone ever heard of the word manifesto before? Or does anyone know what it means? Yeah. So a manifesto is like a statement of beliefs or a statement of intent. And normally we hear these in like political statements. Sometimes they are negative, like with terrorist groups, we hear manifestos, or people who are going to bomb a place. Unfortunately, sometimes people who do school shootings have a manifesto. But we also have good examples, like civil rights movements have manifestos. Right. Okay. So they are a document wherein a person, government, or organization outlines their intentions, motivations, or views. Okay. So that's pretty clear to everyone. It's basically just a document that states out what they believe, what their intent is, and what they're trying to achieve. Okay. So these are public declarations of their intent on a topic of our idea. So I want you guys to be thinking about, you're going to create your own utopia. So what do you want your public declarations of your utopia to be? What are the ideas you want to bring across? And what are the like rules, our ideas that are going to make up your utopian government? So how do we write a utopia? So we're going to kind of take the 5-paragraph essay form where we have the introduction, the 3-body paragraph, and then the last paragraph is a conclusion. Now, you're not limited to the 5-paragraph essay. It could be longer. It could have 10 paragraphs. I just want it to be at least 1 page long and at the most 3 pages. You don't have to make it 3 pages. It just has to be somewhere in between those two. And as long as you hit all these points that I'm about to tell you. So first you want to write in the present tense. So why do you think you would want to write your manifesto in the present tense? Yeah. So writing in the present tense will draw your audience in, right? So it also makes your statements more compelling and hopeful. So for example, if you were to say, all of our citizens will have the opportunity to work for the common good, or all of our citizens will have the opportunity for free healthcare or something like that. So if you write it in the present tense, it sounds like it's something you've already achieved, and people will probably be more likely to put their faith in you and their trust in you, their time and money into you, rather than being like, oh, we hope to achieve free healthcare, or we hope to achieve free education and universal liberties. Like, if you write in the present tense, it just makes it seem more real. Okay, another thing is that it should interrupt the status quo. Who knows what status quo means? Yes, like the norm of society. So for example, we're going to listen to Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, because that's an example of a manifesto. And he was breaking up the status quo. So during that time in America, we had racial segregation, where black people and white people couldn't like drink from the same water fountain. It didn't have the same rights. So he was shaking up the status quo there, trying to enact change. Okay, so that's what your manifesto should have. Another thing, it should be grounded in reality. So you don't want to make these big sweeping statements that are never going to come true. So for example, you don't want to write something, this is ridiculous, but all of our citizens will have access to free hovercrafts. Like, don't put things like that. Make them grounded in reality, things that are actual, achievable, and realistic. And I know you guys are writing a utopia manifesto, and so that might be in your utopia, but try to make them kind of more realistic things. And lastly, they must reflect things that are desired, and they must motivate. So no one's going to want to read your manifesto if it doesn't motivate them to action, and if it doesn't have things that people want. So for example, if there's hunger in the world, maybe your manifesto, you would write something like, we'll have equal food sharing programs or community gardens, you know, things like that. Things that people need and want, you're going to want to include in your manifesto. Okay? So right now we're going to listen to a speech by Martin Luther King Jr., I Have a Dream. And as we're listening to this speech, I want you to notice that if his speech touches on these different objects and topics of a manifesto, and jot those down. Okay? All right, so did you guys notice in that speech different topics? Like, for example, did he say things in the present tense? Did he say things that were grounded in reality? Okay, discuss in your table groups what you got. All right, perfect. So now what you guys are going to do for the rest of class is you're going to write your manifesto. But before I break you up into groups, I'm going to give you a sample of the Communist Manifesto that was written by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. And so this is a real document where they envision a society without classes, social classes, without private property, and without like a state. And this work actually provided the basis to political systems for Russia, China, Cuba, and Eastern Europe. So manifestos are powerful things that can bring about change and affect the lives of millions of people. For example, Martin Luther King Jr.'s manifesto kind of spurred on more people to action in the civil rights movement in America. And the Communist Manifesto, whether good or bad, has affected the lives of millions of people in our world today. So I want to give you a sample of that. I want you to read through that, kind of look at your notes from the I Have a Dream speech, and then I want you to focus on writing your own manifesto on what your utopia would look like and what you want to achieve in that utopia. And if you don't finish it in class today, you're going to do it as homework tonight, and then you'll turn it in our next class period. All right, so go ahead and get all your stuff out and start writing.